Pulled my shirt up, grabbed my firearm, and turned around and fired 4 times.
This is attorney Andy Marcantel, attorney Marc J. Victor, and attorney Rachel Moss. We are from the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm, here today with an excellent story involving an AOR client. How you doing, guys?
Doing great.
Awesome. It's great to have both you guys here. And I'm so excited to do this because we almost never get to do these, understandably so, right? Because, we're not a club, and certain clubs, they can say whatever they want. They don't have attorney-client privilege. They don't have attorney-client confidentiality. But we do, and of course, we honor that because we're professionals. But every once in a while, a client says, hey, guys, I'm happy to talk about what happened. I will sign the media release, which gives you permission to talk about my case. And we got one of these today.
Yeah, this is understandable too. These are oftentimes very traumatic situations that people go through, very consequential in their lives and the lives of their family members. And understandably, a lot of people don't want to publicize that for the whole world to see. But every now and then we have a really, I think, good success story with a client that wants their story to be told.
Yeah, so let's get into it. I'm excited to retell this one.
Well, let's introduce that client, and we have Ryan appearing on Zoom. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the show. So you were an AOR client at the time of the incident that you were involved in. How did you find out about our program, by the way?
There was a popular YouTuber I was watching, and he had originally been with a competitor of yours, but there was a controversy where they were not supporting one of their clients during really their time of need. And so I did not want that to happen to me, just in case. He had said you guys his name, and I went to the website and signed right up. I switched over immediately. Just thought you guys had a lot of, just seeming like more support. And it just seemed a lot different than insurance versus more of a law firm. It seemed to be a smarter way to go.
Yeah, you were one of those guys who saw, I think it was probably the Kayla Giles matter that you're referring to.
Yes.
And we actually had Kayla on, and she was a USCCA member. And they started funding her defense. She got into a shooting. It was also a fatal shooting. And to her lawyer's surprise, they kind of pulled the rug out from under her and said, we just decided this isn't a valid act of self-defense before the trial. We just made that decision.
While she was presumed innocent.
Yeah. And
that's awful. I mean, that can really it can make things just so much worse.
Yeah, so we put that out there. People found out about that, and you were one of those people who learned about that situation, and I think understandably so, didn't feel comfortable that maybe that company had your back, and so you decided to trust us, and I'm very, very honored and thankful that you did, and I feel that way about everybody who trusts us in our program, and we tell people we have their back, and so this is a great opportunity for us to tell the story.
So let's talk about the incident that you were involved in. It happened back in April of this year, 2024. Why don't you just walk us through what happened?
It seemed like a pretty normal day. I usually on Wednesday mornings, I have an appointment I need to get to. So I'm out there in Dallas pretty early. And when I was leaving the appointment, coming back home, I usually take a shortcut. It's kind of a shortcut to get to the highway. And unbeknownst to me, it actually cuts through Oak Cliff, which is a pretty dangerous area. I didn't realize it at the time, but while I was driving back, there was a car behind me who, during the process of driving, sped up and hit me from behind, which was a little strange. It seemed weird because we were driving very slowly and there wasn't like a stoplight where they could have accidentally hit. It just seemed almost intentional, which was very weird. So when I was getting close to the highway, and I'd seen some bright lights. It was a McDonald's that had really bright lighting, but when I pulled over into a darker area. I thought that there was a way to get to that McDonald's, but it was actually the street right before it. And it's very dark and kind of in almost like there's like hills on either side. So it's a very dark area. And I realized that, but I didn't think it would be too much of a problem. So after I pulled over, I immediately got out and took a look at my back bumper to see if there's any damage. And then I saw the person who had hit me pull ahead of me. And I told him there was no damage. And he seemed very irate at first, very angry, saying, well, mine's very, very damaged, is what he seemed to explain. And I thought that was okay. Then we'll exchange information. So I offered to exchange information, and when I was looking through my phone to find my identification card, at first, when I said let's exchange information, he had said that he was going to go get his phone. So I said, okay. And I wasn't paying attention. I should have been paying attention. But I was looking through my phone trying to find my identification card to send to him. And when he came back with a gun. And he poked it into my side. I could feel it. He was poking it into me. And I looked down, and then there was almost like I went into shock. Because I was very shocked that had happened. I didn't realize, at that point, I realized that the situation was getting really bad very quickly. And then I had remembered that I did carry a firearm. And I was like, this might go very badly. So I put my hands up and I told him, take whatever you want. And I did not want to cause any problems. I just wanted him to take what he wanted and leave. And I gave him my phone and my wallet. He demanded, he said something about, give me what you have or you're going to catch a bullet or something. But I think it was more explicit. So I gave him phone and wallet, and he still kept pushing the gun into me. And that was very much concerned. Like, I realized that if I didn't do something, he was most likely going to shoot me. So when I think he was trying to pull me around or push me to the back of my trunk to either get something out of it. Not sure what he wanted at that point. I was hard to understand him because I was very much high adrenaline, pounding my ears, that kind of thing. So at that point, I knew that I had to do something. So I pulled my shirt when he pushed me up against the car. I pulled my shirt up, grabbed my firearm, and turned around and fired 4 times. And I mean, each shot felt very slow, and I watched to see if the barrel of the gun would go down, if he would not continue to try to point it at me. Because I really didn't want to do that. Every shot was just not something I wanted to do. I was hoping that he would drop his gun, but he did not. So after that happened, I was very much in shock. I went deaf because this is very loud. So I ran up the hill to call 911 at the McDonald's, and then ran back down the hill, and I saw him, and I thought he might live if I did something. So I went to help him to see if it might be possible. I found my phone, called 911, and tried to do life-saving as best I could. Took him a long time to get there, but as soon as they did, they tried to help him. So people did actually come out to help, but it took a while. And I didn't think, because when the ambulance came, they did not leave with him. So I knew that was not a good sign. I called my wife. I called my parents just to let them know what was going on. My wife, she was pretty great. She, really came through. I thought she might panic, but she came through and called everyone. And my parents immediately came out to help as well. I'm really glad that I had those dash cams, actually.
Yeah, we should say something about that, because you were driving a Tesla, and the Tesla was recording at the time. And we'll include the video in the link so people can see it. Obviously, you've seen it many times. We've seen it many times. But it kind of captures the most important part of the incident right there. And it's a good thing for you that was captured.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely was. Human memory is not perfect.
That's right.
So things that you think you remember aren't exact all the time. You get things wrong. Everything felt a lot slower. I thought I was a lot farther away, but I didn't realize I was so up close. It was such a up close struggle until after I'd seen the video. What's funny is that, the Tesla itself, it's an older model. It didn't actually have built-in cameras. So I specifically purchased dash cams, and those are really what during the interrogation, those are what really got them to believe everything to believe, because they could see and hear what happened.
So just to flesh out the facts a little bit here, after the shooting, you then run to the McDonald's, which, I remember the maps of the area and how it's kind of...
Yeah, it's a big hill.
Right.
It's a big embankment hill.
Yeah,
and I remember running up. I still had my gun in my hand, so I put it away. I didn't want to scare anyone. So I put it away. I put it back in my holster, and then I started asking for help. I said, please, can I borrow your phone? Is there, to get as quickly as I can to get people here. So I knew that the quicker people got here, the better. And they kind of looked at me funny, but because everybody has a cell phone, but they thought that was strange. But I gave them the address of that McDonald's. Somebody put their phone on speakerphone. I dialed 911 and gave them the information. And I said, I have to go. So I went back down the hill to see if there was something I could do.
Yeah, so you basically bust into this McDonald's and say, hey, we need help. There was a shooting right down there. We need help. Somebody call 911. And the McDonald's employees are like, huh?
They're all looking at each other like, is this guy crazy? Is he a scammer? They didn't know. When I went back down the hill, I did see that he still had his gun in his hand. And I was looking at him, and I decided to take the risk because I figured that if I didn't do something, he wasn't going to live. So I kicked it out of his hand. I ran over and kicked it, and it went across the ground and hit the other side of the curb. And then I started trying to help him. Called 911, put him on speakerphone because I don't know CPR that well. I kind of know some of it, but I didn't know what I should do exactly. I'm not trained to do life saving. So I got 911 on the phone, gave him where I was, asked again, and I gave him where I was, cross streets as best I could, and then started trying to help him. I think there was there's a family who lives very close, and they came out to see what was going on and gave me a t-shirt to try to, stop the bleeding, try to help him. He was just too hurt. I don't know if there's anything that could have been done.
Some of the people from the McDonald's actually accompanied you back down to the vehicle, right? Or did any of them come out?
Initially, no. I was by myself, and then they came. I'm not sure when, but I do remember looking up at the hill, and there were several people looking down. I do remember that. I remember there was a family who was literally within a few, 20 or 30 feet away from the front door is where this kind of happened. And they came out. They were in their pajamas. I felt really bad that they were having to deal with that. But they did help. They were definitely there to help. I mean, they're trying to give me advice on what to do. And I think they may have asked a little bit what had happened, but I'm not sure what I even told them.
Sure.
But it was, definitely something you're never going to forget.
So then the cops arrive, and tell us about your interactions that you have with the cops on scene.
Well, I don't know if it's just the area or what. It just took quite some time. They did arrive. There was one officer who came. He started to get a notebook out and get information. And as soon as I started to explain what had happened, he immediately said, let's wait till the detectives get here. And then the ambulance came right behind him, so that was very close. So they put me in the back of one of their cop cars, and I just waited. I made some calls. I mean, I'm not sure if you're supposed to do that, but I needed to talk to someone. I tried to call my wife. I called my parents, just to let them know what had happened. And you're just sitting back there, and there's nothing you can do. You have to wait and pray.
So At that time, did you contact a family member and ask them to call attorneys on retainer?
Well, I contacted my wife, and she had reminded me that I had signed up with you guys. Like she was like, I know you. She was like, I know you have some kind of thing for this, and I said, oh yeah. And then I remembered the name, and she looked through my email to find all the details.
If I remember correctly, that call came in pretty early morning, and
Oh, yeah.
I think they spoke to you, Mark.
Yeah, I remember when the call came in, it was not marked as an emergency. So I think it was your mom who called. And for whatever reason, she didn't say it was an emergency, so it didn't get into the usual emergency queue and get to the strike force. But I checked my email first thing in the morning, and this thing came in at 5:13 a.m., and I saw what was going on, and I thought that we need to call back immediately. So I called back, spoke with your mom, had a very nice conversation with her. And we were on the phone for quite a while. I assured her that we got it. We're going to handle it. We're going to get involved. And I immediately sent a message over to the strike force. And one of the people, it was Kaylee at our firm who was on the strike force that week. And she jumped all over this thing. And they immediately, everybody moved into action as we do. So it took us no time at all to get Clint on the horn. And we may talk to Clint and maybe supplement something with this video, and he was great. He got involved, and what seemed like a very short period of time later, they had taken you down to the jail, and there was a big attorney meeting that Rachel was on, Andy was on, Clint was there in person, you were there. So you guys can talk about that because I wasn't on that one.
So that morning, a lot was going on behind the scenes before we even got to that point. Our strike force really jumped into action. Like you said, Kaylee was involved. The first thing we actually had to do was locate where exactly Ryan was. We were speaking with the detective, seeing if we could get any preliminary information before we even spoke with you, Ryan. We were coordinating with your mom. I think I was texting your mom, your wife, and Clint all at one point. I had multiple conversations open on the phone. And then Andy and I had our own strategy meeting with Clint where we talked through what was our plan once Clint got to the station. And we decided if the police would allow it, Clint would go in to meet with you, and then Clint would dial in Andy and I so we could have a conversation together.
Yeah, and that was a really productive conversation. Typically, as viewers of our programs on YouTube will know, our general advice is just to shut up and not make any statements to the police. But what we really wanted to do in that moment, and you remember how tense that was. We were all talking together. You're in the station. You've been arrested. You're coming down from being involved in this very traumatic incident. And I remember we're trying to calm you down and get the information that we need. And the more and more I heard, the more and more I'm saying, oh, this is extremely defensible case. You keep in mind at that point, nobody had seen the video. The police hadn't seen the video. We didn't even know if the video was going to capture everything, right? Because
I wasn't even sure if they were still working. Like, because those things, you have to kind of keep up with it. You have to pay the subscription and make sure you have enough space on the SD card. I really wasn't keeping up with it. I just let it run and just completely kind of forgot that it was even there. And I'm really glad that it was still there.
So another important thing that was happening behind the scenes while we were having that conversation with you at the police department, before we had that meeting with you, Rachel mentioned we had a strategy meeting with our local council, and we connected with a local investigating firm, and we sent a private investigator down to the scene. So while we were talking to you in the station, we sent the private investigator down to start interviewing employees of McDonald's and interviewing people in that neighborhood, and I'm glad that we did.
That's really amazing support. I think my mom is very much thankful. She's saying thank you so much for just being there and having that level of support, which we just weren't expecting.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been doing this a long time. I've been practicing 30 years. Our firm's been here 27 years. We know what it's like to have a family member taken into custody. And, this is just one of the many sort of out-of-the-box things that, sometimes I call our firm, I say, we're like a boutique law firm or concierge law firm. That's what I mean. These extra little out-of-the-box things. Because we knew, I could tell from the first phone call, your mom understandably was very freaked out about what was going on. My goal in that moment was to assure her that we were going to handle this thing one way or another, no matter what direction it goes. We're on it. We're going to handle it. We're going to be there to the end and do everything that can be done. I told her that we're going to defend your son exactly the way I would want to be defended myself. And that's exactly what Andy was talking about. Let's get an investigator down there right now to make sure if there's any evidence that helps us, we preserve it. And it's a good thing that happened.
It sure is. You want to tell about the investigator, Rachel?
Of course. So we sent out AFR investigations. Andrew Reggio took the lead on this case, and he was looking into the McDonald's employees that day. And at that time, we were in our strategy meeting, so we didn't really know what the investigator was finding out at this point. But what we later learned is after we finished our meeting with you, Ryan, the investigator got back to us and said, hey, look, I interviewed all of these McDonald's employees. So far, none of them witnessed the actual event. They only witnessed the aftermath. However, they told us about one employee that had been there that had left after their shift. And the investigator let us know that he'd be going back the next day to interview this employee. So the next day, investigator goes back, speaks with this employee, and then the investigator sends the report back to us. And I was shocked because what the employee said is that he never spoke to police. And this employee was actually the only eyewitness to what actually occurred. And this eyewitness's feedback was invaluable because he was able to say that he witnessed the event and he saw the other individual was the aggressor in the incident and that you were acting in defense. And so it's amazing to think that if we had not sent that investigator out, this is some testimony that the police would have never heard, never even considered. When we submitted all the information to the prosecutor assigned to the case, this is potential testimony that would have been lost forever if an investigator hadn't gone to the scene and then continued his follow-ups.
Yeah, this is really incredible. You know, naturally, it turns out that the only person who wasn't interviewed by the police turned out to be the most important witness in the entire case. That's usually how it goes. But also really important to note that the video only shows kind of the end of the confrontation, right? The video on the back of that Tesla shows the actual shooting, and you can see the guy kind of pushing Ryan around and Ryan turning around and defending himself. But a prosecutor might not have been convinced that this was self-defense only based on the end of the altercation. It really was key in convincing the prosecutor in this case to dismiss the investigation and refuse to bring the charges to the grand jury, which we're going to get to in a minute. Really was key to convince the prosecutor that everything leading up to the shooting was Ryan being victimized by this person, and that witness was absolutely key because they saw everything unfold. They saw that he was being aggressed against, so that really kind of completed the puzzle in laying out the facts for the state.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important to really have a team standing by ready to go, right? Because otherwise, you know, Ryan is in a situation, he's in the jail. There's nothing he can do. It's going to be difficult. It's on the parents to now figure out who we're going to find, who's in town, who can we get on, who's even available, these kinds of things. In the same problem, you know, if you have one of these other programs, they're programs. They're not law firms. They got to find somebody. They got to get things done. We know exactly what needs to be done. And because we moved so quickly to get that investigator on the case, right? I mean, this was the kind of defense that you get when money's not a problem. And that's why they sometimes say, you know, you get a better shake in the justice system if you have money to defend yourself. Because had that witness not been interviewed by the investigator at that time, minimally, Ryan probably gets charged here. And even if he beats the case, you know, I was talking to Ryan before we put the video on, and I've told him on the cases where, you know, we've gone all the way, and I've done many murder trials, when you go all the way to the end, even when you win and get a not guilty, man, the client doesn't feel like, I mean, okay, they're great that they didn't get convicted, but you are just exhausted emotionally, financially. It's just a miserable ordeal. And so that's one of the things that's just so great about this program. Ryan didn't have to, as soon as his mom made that call and connected with us, we're on the thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, going back to the police department, ultimately, Rachel and I and our local counsel spoke to the police, and the police agreed to release you that day. but the police wanted to keep a few items because their position was, we're investigating. We're going to take a close look at this. We're not convinced that this was self-defense. We may charge your guy. We don't have enough to hold him right now, but we may charge him, so we're still going to investigate. We're going to impound his car, and we're going to keep his wallet. We want to keep some things, and the firearm and things like that. We want to keep this stuff as evidence and continue to investigate. And so ultimately, you're released at that point. Tell us what that felt like to get out of custody at that point.
I mean, you're there, and you really just don't know if you're going to get out. You don't really know. So, you're just sitting there, and a lot of times you're exhausted, you're hungry and thirsty, and you're just all those things. You just don't want to be there. It's a pretty awful experience. I do know that the detectives, after I gave them my phone, they had tried to give me a warrant sheet to sign, but I told them, you don't really need that. I have nothing to hide. Here you go. And I gave them my passcode and everything. There was really nothing for me to hide. I'm a pretty boring guy overall.
Yeah, I'll say, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to say something about that. That was one of the major strategy decisions that we discussed with you during that meeting that we had with you at the jail. And I remember we spent some time on that, right? Any good lawyer is going to kind of inquire pretty deeply into what could be on that phone. What are you giving them right now? And what are the advantages versus the disadvantages of being transparent with the police? Are we going to make them get a warrant? Are we going to be compliant with this? I remember that was the source of a huge discussion.
Yeah. And I just, I basically, I knew that there was just nothing there that I had to hide from them. There's just, I don't do anything that would be cause for concern. I'm a relatively normal person, so I didn't see a problem with that. Go for it,
Yeah, standard advice is get a warrant. And so if you don't have an attorney on board at that moment, you're going to say, get a warrant. But because we were all able to discuss this thing and have an understanding of what happened, we could make a judgment call based on what you had told us was not on the phone, based on what we knew about the case, based on to what extent do we want to cooperate with these guys early, right now, and all of that worked out. But these are careful decisions, right? This is why it's important to have a lawyer at the beginning who's actually going to be representing you, not just somebody on the phone giving you advice and they're going to hand it off to another lawyer and then they're not responsible for the early decisions in the case. So, yeah, I think this case kind of highlights the importance of having your team, the same team that's going to be through the trial if it goes to trial, making the very decisions right there at the time of the arrest. And again, this is a good case to highlight that important point.
Exactly, because there are some cases where we would absolutely not turn over a phone absolutely not turn over body cam or dash cam. But in this case, we carefully interviewed Ryan. I probably felt a little bit like an interrogation when we were asking you what's on the phone. Wanted to make sure there wasn't pictures of a burglary you committed the last week or something on your phone. So we always want to check for that. But in this case, we spoke with you, Ryan, and you were very confident about the facts of the case, about what was likely pictured on the dash camera, what was on your phone. And we determined in your case that it would be helpful to turn these things over to the police, both for the purposes of having cooperation early on in the case, but also because it looked like in your case, the dash camera specifically would serve to exonerate you in a way that you could be released that same day.
Yes.
And it helped us build some rapport with the police as well. I think it has a huge amount to do with why we got you out of custody that day. We were able to add that, look, we're going to save you guys the resources and time to get a warrant. And in exchange, we want to build some confidence here. We want to build some trust. And that confidence building became kind of a theme here because we had many conversations with the detective after that day. You remember we were constantly on the phone with updates and giving them mitigation information on your behalf. But what I wanted to know, Ryan, is when you finally were released from custody, who's the first person you call and how did it feel?
Well, as soon as I walked out, I saw my mother and father, right? They were there because they had come up and they had been interrogated as well, just because they came up so quickly. And they were downstairs. And as soon as I walked out, I saw them, gave them a hug, and I just wanted to go home. I do know that the detectives They were actually very nice. They were very nice, very professional. I will say that they were stern with certain things that they wanted, but they were very respectful. So I was respectful towards them, and they definitely wanted to get to the truth of it. So I think that they did, and I don't believe that they had any malice or intent. They were just seemed like very nice, professional people. And so as soon as I left, it was just a huge relief that I was just out. But of course, it still feels like you have something over your head, you still have to be concerned about. But in that first 24 hours, I was still pretty much in shock, still pretty numb. But, it was definitely a relief to finally be home, get to see my wife. Yeah.
Now, at this point, the ball was in the state's court to investigate the case and make a decision on charging. And this is when we really sprung into action, because when we're in a pre-charge posture like this, it's super important to try to convince the prosecutor early that they should not charge the case, simply because we're going to beat them if they do, right? You want to convince them that it will be a waste of time and resources to bring a charge against your client, because if they do, it's not going to look good for them when we get a dismissal. And so in addition to legal defenses and presenting those types of things to the prosecutor's office and to the detectives, we included lots of mitigation. And you guys have heard us talk about mitigation before. It's that fancy lawyer word that basically means good guy stuff that shows the type of person who Ryan is. And on the flip side of that, who this alleged victim was. And we actually did a criminal history and background check on the alleged victim and found some interesting things, which we shared with the prosecutor's office.
Yeah, this guy's a troublemaker. Certainly. I mean, not just from this incident, but he had a history of being a troublemaker. And, that's the kind of thing you want to bring to the prosecutor's attention early and say, hey, look, it's pretty clear who the good guy here is and who's the bad guy here and what happened. There's really no need to bring this thing because, we're kind of letting you know in a nice way. If you do, we're going to fight it. He's got a team behind him. This is not a guy who's got to take a deal because he can't afford to go to trial or something like that. And, as lawyers, we would have loved to have tried a case like this. But our client doesn't want to go through that. So we're trying to do everything we can to try to cut it off right at the ankles before this thing starts getting going, and that's what happened here. And you guys did an excellent job making demands of the prosecutor. If you're going to present this thing to the grand jury, here's all these things we want you to present, things that make our client look good, things that make alleged victim look bad. Here are the facts we want you to present.
Yeah, we sent a certified letter with all that information, a comprehensive letter that laid out all of the legal defenses and the important things that we were demanding be presented to the grand jury if it got that far. I'm guessing the prosecutor took a look at it and said, this seems like more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, the specific things we asked the prosecutor to present in this case were the dash camera footage, our expert's report where he spoke to the eyewitness as well as the other witnesses he spoke to, and then I'll call him the aggressor's criminal history. And it's very interesting in this case because the aggressor's criminal history exactly matches up with what he was trying to do here.
Yeah,
there was
absolutely.
evidence that this aggressor had been investigated for theft and aggravated assault in the past. And it really showed a pattern here. And while just because someone does something in the past doesn't necessarily mean they'll repeat it, here there's pretty strong evidence that if this person has a history of theft, has a history of aggravated assault, that he was likely the aggressor, the one acting improperly in this case.
Yeah, it was really cueing the prosecutor to let them know, if you guys charge our guy, we're going to make a huge deal about this. We are going to make sure that jury knows who the deceased was. It's not a victim, it's an aggressor.
And another thing that I think people forget about the Attorneys on Retainer program is some of the other stuff around the edges that people forget about, that they don't pay attention to that can be really valuable. And one of the things in this case was the counseling. Because it's not lost on us. I mean, you heard Ryan say he was still freaked out 24 hours after this incident. That's really common. We have clients come in the office. It can be several days after the incident. I notice their hand is still shaking. And so you really do need somebody who knows what they're doing to talk to. Because, PTSD, and I let Ryan talk about this, but PTSD is a real thing.
Yeah.
So are you willing to say something about what happened at this point?
Oh yeah, I realized pretty early on that I was most likely going to need some kind of counseling of some kind. I felt, even days later, it was still, my wife would catch me just sitting on the bed and staring off into nothing, just pretty traumatized by what had happened. And I was realizing pretty early on that it would be much smarter and less stressful if I just had someone to speak to. And you guys really came through. You recommended a great, psychologist to talk with. And he had a great, just talked on the phone. It was really nice to be able to just talk to someone and just resolve some feelings that you're going to have, because you're going to have all kinds of, anger, guilt, all kinds of reasons and different things that come up. And it's nice to be able to work through those with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and of course, that's a benefit of being an AOR client. Our clients don't pay a dime for this service. We help find and facilitate the counseling, and then, of course, we pay for all of the costs of the counselor. And I think the program director himself of
Broden.
AOR helped to set this whole thing up, and it was with Dr. Michael Edelstein.
Yeah, 30 years of doing this, we encounter a lot of different experts along the way. And there's a reason why we put the people we put up on the website. And Michael Edelstein, he's in California, but he does this counseling across the nation. He can meet you on Zoom, and he can be very, very effective. And this guy, we've done a couple of podcasts with him. He's written some books. He is really qualified. He helps people get past these kinds of things. So when I heard that Ryan was going to talk to Dr. Edelstein, I knew this was going to end well. I knew he was going to say, you know what, this guy was really good and helpful. Are you willing to share anything about your experience just talking with Michael Edelstein?
Yeah, he was, very, very formal and professional, but, he would just sit and let you talk. But he had some structured things he wanted you to do. He wanted specific concepts. Some of it was a little bit of his book, some of it was his own things. And he would go over just really these cycles of bad thinking that can really suck you down into this black hole. It was mostly with the idea of wrong think, the idea that if you consider these specific concepts in the wrong way, they can be really detrimental to your health. But if you follow these specific ideals, it can really help you to get out of it and to get better over time.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's not overnight, but it helps a lot to have that support.
Yeah, I was very happy to hear that you spoke with Dr. Edelstein and that he was helpful to you, because it made me happy. That's why we include that in the program. I don't think anybody signs up for the psychological counseling aspect of the thing. But, if you're in the situation Ryan's in, this can be invaluable. You don't know who to call. You don't know who's good. And, drawing our experience as your attorneys, really doing our counseling function here in connecting Ryan with the right person to give him the help he needs at the time he needs it. This is something that really warmed my heart, and I was very glad Ryan took advantage of that.
Yeah, on the subject of miscellaneous things that it was our pleasure to help Ryan with during this incident, there were some issues with getting his property returned. As I mentioned earlier, they seized some of your property under the guise of, well, we're still investigating the case and we're not giving it back. And I remember you called us and you asked Rachel, is there a way I can get that property back even while the case is under investigation?
Yeah, and at this point, I had already had an established relationship with the detective that was assigned. I had talked to him a few times on the phone. So I reached out to him. I sent him an email and said, hey, we need to start working on this. Ryan needs his vehicle. He needs his wallet. When can we get these things back? And we went back and forth for a while because, of course, in any investigation, there could be evidentiary value to those items that he had. He might need the car in the investigation. He might need the wallet. However, we really worked on the detective and impressed upon him the need, why you would need your car, why the car being in evidentiary custody for so long could be detrimental to the car. And we had multiple conversations, and eventually we convinced the detective to release the property back to you.
Yeah, the detrimental to the car. I remember, wasn't there an issue, Ryan, that because it was a Tesla, I had never heard this before with an electronic vehicle, if it hits 0% battery charge, it totals the vehicle potentially?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if it's not trickle charged and the battery goes down to zero, it damages it, and you need a new battery, and those batteries are like 22 grand.
Wow. Yeah, I
They're incredibly
remember.
expensive.
I remember even Rachel talked to the detective and said, "Hey, detective, if you're not willing to release the vehicle immediately because the charge is getting low, can I send somebody down to police impound with a battery to hook it up to the?"
Because I'm getting the alerts. I'm getting alerts on my phone. And it's telling me you need to charge it. I'm like, oh no, that's gonna brick the car.
These are the kinds of little things that I think a lot of lawyers don't do that we do, right? These are the kinds of things that I think we try to do to set us apart.
The concierge service.
Yes,
That's what you were talking
to let
about.
people know what we're about. And you guys had a great experience at the NRA convention in Texas. I remember when you guys came back and Ryan's dad kind of popped in at the table with Ryan. You guys want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I think he's there.
Yeah, he's here.
I'm here.
We got to know and befriend the whole family here. You mentioned the mom, and here's Dad.
Yeah.
Hello.
How you doing, Annabelle?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you again.
These guys came back from that convention and told us about a little visit they had with you guys. Will you talk about that? That meant so much to my team here.
Well, so it was huge. I mean, it was at the Dallas Convention Center, and there was just multiple exhibits, so many gun vendors, a lot of fun. But I kept talking to Ryan. I said, is the attorneys for retainer going to be here? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, we'd like to go. I'd like to go visit them because you had made such a huge difference to my son that we're very grateful because the outcome could have been completely different. So the fact that you guys were there, as a matter of fact, we even changed because we were with the insurance company, USCCA, and we completely removed that and went with you guys. And attorneys for retainer, in my opinion, has been excellent. Your service has been phenomenal. My wife woke me up that day just to revert back. And I was asleep, and she says, "Get up, your son's been shot." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm just waking up and trying to understand what's going on. And she just basically said, "Just get up." I said, "Well, I mean, is he alive?" And she said, yes, he's been shot, but we got to get going. So we got up and we took off, and she said, "Where are we going?" I said, "We're going to Dallas." I said, well, "What's going on?" And she goes, "I don't know. We're just going." So we ended up, we showed up, and it was a very interesting situation and fearful at the same time. But I'm so grateful for you guys to help my son through this whole process, because we had no idea what was going on, what happened, and we were just getting bits and bits of information back and forth. And then we spent the entire day there until Ryan got released. But it's been grateful. The show was great, by the way. I know I'm switching back and forth, but it was fun to go to the NRA. Like I said, it was a big event. I'm glad you guys showed up. I'm glad I got to meet you guys because we've talked about that.
Yeah, that was great.
And well, we're very thankful. As a matter of fact, we're so thankful for you guys that we're telling our neighbors about you.
Yeah,
we're telling our other families, my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, everybody, because we saw you guys in action, and that was really, really, really good.
They came back from that conference and they said, yeah, Ryan and his dad showed up, and the dad, in a very emotional way, said, "You guys saved my son's life." And
you did.
And I'm a dad too, and to hear that from a dad saying that to our team, that I just felt that inside immediately. That's why we exist. You can't put a dollar value on that. No, that's just something that you do.
That's what makes it all worth it.
Yeah, that was just fantastic. And to have clients who, appreciate the job that we do. I'm glad it didn't go further, but had it gone to trial, we would have been there, and we would have been there in force and fought everything. I told your wife that we're going to represent him exactly the way I would want to be represented myself. And when we say that, we mean that. because that's what people want. That's what they expect when they sign up in our program. And I want to thank you guys so much for even being willing to talk about this. I know it's super hard to talk about, and a lot of times people don't want to talk about it, but it gives us an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to talk about these kinds of things and to just put it out there to the world and say, look, we do deliver on the stuff that we promise.
And you guys do. And like I said, I really appreciate it.
Your case is full of so many important lessons too, Ryan. There's so many things that viewers can take from your situation. There's so many things that you did right. And, you know, just looking back and sharing your story like this, certainly I guarantee you it's going to help a lot of our viewers. A lot of people are going to comment positively on this, that they learned something from you sharing it. So we want to thank you for appearing and sharing it.
So we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that we wrote a big letter to the detective and to the prosecutor, because in Texas, even when there's an incident like this, where at this point I think the detective was on our side, detective realized this was a strong case of self-defense, but he said in any case like this, we do have to still submit it to a prosecutor and a grand jury for a grand jury to make a decision. And that's when we shifted gears to presenting evidence to the prosecutor, wrote them a big letter as well, laid out all the evidence we'd want them to consider and present. It was then submitted to the prosecutor. We regularly followed up with the prosecutor. It's one of my jobs to bother prosecutors in situations like this to give us an update. And eventually the prosecutor called into the firm and let us know they were turning down charges. And so, you know, at this point, the case is resolved and we're really happy, you know, to have this happy ending. And yeah, charges dropped. And yeah, I just wanted to say it was very special for me, you know, to get to meet you as well at the NRA conference, because I always say, you know, I'm not a criminal defense attorney just for the money. I'm not doing it just for fun, but it's really great in incidents like this where there are responsible gun owners who make a wise decision in self-defense, and that we can stop them from getting railroaded by the justice system. And I look at this case and see moments where things could have gone differently. You know, if our investigator hadn't met that eyewitness, if our local counsel hadn't been there to interview in person. And this is, you know, why I'm proud, you know, to work for Marc and Andy and be an attorney at Attorneys for Freedom, because these are the moments that I want to be able to step in and help out. And I just thank you too for being really great examples of responsible gun owners in the Second Amendment community.
Well, thank you.
I got a few final thoughts here. First, Andy and I are very happy to have Rachel on our team. I can tell you that.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. Second, we wouldn't be doing this interview at all if this case hadn't been turned down, right? If this thing was still being considered, we always put our clients first before everything. Before our own interests, and so we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't feel very confident that this thing is dead. And then also I wanted to mention, you know, something we should pay a little bit of attention to. If you didn't have your firearm that day, right? This thing, you might not be here.
Why isn't this all over the news?
And that was the final point. If this had been a bad shoot, you would have been all over national news. But it's a case of a law-abiding citizen who properly defended himself with a firearm that he carried, that was loaded, against a real bad guy, did it successfully. And where's the national news talking about yet another valid use of a firearm by a good guy to stop a bad guy? This is what's outrageous about our press. These kinds of stories should be all over the national press, and they're not. Only the bad shoots get out there. But anyways, we're doing our part to put it out there. We thank you guys so much for doing this.
And I wanted to make one more comment too. Part of our bonding together as a father and son is we literally go to the gun club every weekend and we practice. And we do anywhere from 150 to 250 rounds.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that was part of his self-defense is he was very, very comfortable and confident with his gun.
You have to be.
And that was part of the reason why he chose to protect his life.
If you're going to carry, you need to be trained. You need to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Competent, responsible firearms owners. We need more of those. So, cheers to you guys for doing everything exactly right here.
Thank you guys so much for appearing on the podcast and telling your story.
Take care. This is my wife coming in.
Hey!
I want to say thank you.
Hey, it was a pleasure to talk to you that morning.
Yeah, nice to put a face with the voice.
Good. Yeah, I could feel it in your voice. I know I'm a parent too. I can kind of empathize with how you must have felt that morning. My goal was just to let you know we're going to handle business for your son.
No, it really. I mean, like I said, we were interrogated as well for quite a while, and just sitting in those rooms and texting who I was texting and getting the information. I don't know how many people that I was communicating with for several hours, and it sure makes you feel better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It really made a big difference. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ryan.
All right.
Wow. What a great conversation. What a great family, too. That's a pro to a responsible gun-owning family right there. They're
This
all
is
wonderful people.
why we do what we do right here. Yeah, great example.
Yeah.
Great example.
Wow, that was great. And like you said, it's stories like that as criminal defense attorneys, it makes it all worth it for what we do. So appearing by Zoom now, we have our local counsel who we had the pleasure of working with on Ryan's case. Clint, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers?
I'm Clint Broden. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and we were very impressed by your credentials because what we do whenever we're looking to work with a client on a serious case like the one that Ryan was being investigated for, we like to do a lot of research. And, you know, people can, we've talked about this before, is that people can put their own preferences for a local lawyer on their AOR contact form. But our preference is really when they don't put somebody's name in there. We like to, we know who a good criminal defense attorney is when we meet one.
Yeah, and this was one that Ryan had not specified who he wanted as local counsel, and so that fell to me because I took the initial call, and so I liked Clint's credentials. We got on the phone, we spoke. He struck me in the first 5 minutes. I always say I can tell pretty quick. He struck me in the first 5 minutes as what I like to call a real criminal defense lawyer, somebody who's got not just experience, but the right attitude, and he was ready to go right then and there, and I told him we needed action, and he jumped into
I'm not
action.
sure right then and there. I think you hit me as I was going in the shower.
Well, as soon as he was dried off, he immediately went down to the police station.
Yeah, and this one went really, really well because Clint was able to go almost directly to the police station. And Clint, why don't you talk a little bit about that and let people know kind of how you jumped into action, what you did, and how you wound up on a call with both Andy and Rachel.
Sure. Well, as I was just saying, you got to me, and as soon as I got out of the shower, I went down to the DPD headquarters. About 15 minutes from my house. There, they brought me up. The detective gave me some time with Ryan alone so I could sort of assess the situation and figure out where to go from there and make contact with y'all and give y'all my recommendations. And then things kind of took off from there.
Yeah, and we got things organized in a way that not only were you able to meet with Ryan right away, but you were able to conference in both Rachel and Andy and kind of have a big powwow. So I don't know what it was like to be Ryan sitting there and having three lawyers kind of brainstorming the case, but can you talk a little bit about how you set that up, how that went?
Probably like when the doctors get around and start talking about the surgery they're going to do on you. But, well, I mean, the most immediate decision is the detectives wanted a statement from Ryan. Now, he had already given a portion of a statement, I guess, before he got to y'all, or I don't know how that went down, but not a full statement, and they wanted a full statement. So that was the most immediate concern as to whether we're going to do that. And, you know, ultimately, I let y'all make the call on that, and y'all didn't want him to make a statement at the time. From there, we learned that there was video. I don't know, it was a dash cam, but some sort of video in Ryan's car, which, you know, assuming Ryan was telling the truth, that should hopefully that video would bear out what he was saying. There was also a decision with consultation with y'all to hire an investigator and go out and try to interview witnesses. So before Ryan would talk to the police, you know, we had a better idea of whether his story could be corroborated or not.
Yeah, and obviously that investigator turned out to be generative of one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case, which is that they found that witness that was not interviewed by the police, who turned out to be the only eyewitness in the case, and furthermore said, and it looks like Ryan was acting in self-defense. The guy was attacking him. So that
right. No, that, I mean, ultimately the dash cam was probably the most important, but had he not had the dash cam to corroborate it, the private investigator did find this witness who surprisingly nobody had talked to. And it probably would have come down to his testimony, but for the fact that the dash cam existed and corroborated what Ryan was saying.
Mm-hmm. And so they're in Dallas, they do the investigation, and then they forward it over to the prosecutor's office, who makes a decision on whether to send it to the grand jury or not. And I remember we worked with you on kind of locating the folks that we needed to speak to over there in the prosecutor's office. Can you describe the charging decision process in Dallas?
Well, one nice thing about Dallas is, everybody may be aware, normally the defense has absolutely no participation with the grand jury. Dallas will allow defense attorneys to make a written presentation to the grand jury. There's a county next to us, Tarrant County, which is where Fort Worth is. We'll actually let the lawyers go and make a physical presentation to the grand jury. I just did that in another case a couple of weeks ago and got a no bill for a client.
Nice.
But some of these counties are unique in that they allow some degree of participation from the defense attorneys, which I think is smart, because as a prosecutor, you don't want to prosecute a case that the citizens don't even think there's probable cause to prosecute, because you wind up spending a lot of resources and get egg on your face. And so it makes a lot of sense. I don't know why more district attorneys' offices around the country or federal prosecutors or U.S. attorneys' offices around the country don't do it.
And of course, the ultimate end of the story here is that we put together such a presentation. We presented it to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor contacted us and told us, based on everything that she's seen, she's decided not even to present the case to the grand jury.
No, I think, ultimately it worked out for Ryan. I think that the facts were clear. I mean, it was, that was another thing dealing with Ryan that day. I mean, whether it was self-defense or not, he just took a life, and that would be hard on most people. And he was going through all those emotions while at the same time, having to defend himself with the police. So it was sort of a lot of things going on at one time.
Clint, it was really great having you on this, because, we have a national program and we can't be everywhere at all times. And so we really need to have good, qualified local counsel. And it's an honor to have you, as part of our program. And hopefully we can work on many more cases together. Why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you if they're in the Dallas area?
Sure. Well, I'm at a law firm, Broden and Mickelson. Mick Mickelson and I have been partners since 1998. We were both federal public defenders before we started this practice. So we've been together a long time. My phone number is 214-720-9552. We've got a website. It's Broden Mickelson, BRODEN-MICKELSEN.com.
Okay. Anything else we need to
No, I
get
think
out
that's
on this
about
thing?
it. Clint, thank you for making yourself available.
All right,
brother.
guys. Thank you.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Clint.
Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in today to hear this story. Go and check out attorneysonretainer.us to learn all about our self-defense program and what it can do for you and your family. Also, go check out attorneysforfreedom.com to learn all about our law firm and how we defend people in the justice system. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like below, leave us a comment, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend. Until next time, this has been attorneys Andy Marcantel, Marc J. Victor, and Rachel Moss signing out.
Peace.